Hey, I'm Chris with HiFi Buys, and today we're in the Beatles room here at the store with the Rockport Orion speakers. And today we're going to feature a playlist that was shared with us from our friends at Rockport Technologies. So recently we had an event when we got the Orions, which are phenomenal speakers, and Josh and John from Rockport were kind enough to come down to the store, set these up in our room, in the Beatles room, and to host an event here at the store after hours that many of you attended. This playlist that we're going to share with you today is the playlist that they demonstrated during that event here in the Beatles room. So we wanted to go ahead and share it with you so that you can hear these tracks on your system at home and hopefully come in and hear them on the Orions as well. Having stuff that you know very well and is very well recorded is very important, because I'll be the first to tell you most of the music that I listen to from the late 90s, early 2000s was not recorded super well and does not sound great. And that's a lot of the music that I really enjoyed and listened to growing up. And I always go back to it after a system is set up and after we've evaluated that equipment, because I have such a deep emotional connection to it. And if a system really kind of brings me back to that time, to being in high school, I know that it's doing a lot of things right. But that being said, when demonstrating equipment and when you're evaluating equipment, well-recorded music is by far the most universal thing in a lot of this stuff, but also a good variety of music that shows off different aspects. So you'll find in this playlist a couple of live recordings to contrast with the studio recordings, a lot of great vocal performances. Having songs that help you identify key areas and aspects of a system is very, very important for voicing that system. Oftentimes, at least I've found, I've been here almost 12 years now, and oftentimes I've found that the tracks that are best for demonstration or evaluation of equipment are not the songs that I would choose to listen to for enjoyment. But every once in a while, there are tracks that hit the nail on the head in both categories there, and those are really special to me for sure, because it's so much easier to share those things with people, because it's just such a special moment, really, for me. And so on this playlist, there are definitely a couple of tracks that hit that sweet spot for me. A Hans Zimmer track from the Dune soundtrack, so that's definitely something that I connect with on a personal level from such an amazing movie, but it's awesome that it's also so well recorded and has such great ambiance that it transports you to this other world without having to see the movie. Again, that's the differentiation, at least in my mind, between the enjoyment side and the evaluation and demonstration side of picking the right tracks. Yoshi Horikawa is a great example, and something that most of you, if you've been in our store, have probably heard. Bubbles, which is just a phenomenal track for sound staging and spacing and timing and transients and everything, but it is not something that I would put on the car on a road trip or anything like that. It's not necessarily something that I listen to at home, but whenever we get a new piece of equipment or move something around, it's definitely one of the first, 5 to 10 songs that gets played on that system. Picking tracks that give a sense of the scale of the room that they were recorded in, whether that be a studio or a concert hall or a very small concert venue, having that contrast and having a speaker that's able to feel small and intimate like a small club, like you'll hear in one of these tracks, and then another track that sounds like you're in a symphony hall, is a clear indicator that that speaker is getting completely out of the way, that the cabinet and the drivers are coming together in such a way that they're just reproducing what's in the recording and not sort of contributing anything additional. If you were to have a speaker that really has a very resonant cabinet, you're going to hear that regardless of what you're listening to, and it's going to color the sound of that performance to a point where everything will sound like it was recorded in the same room, right? The differentiation between the room that something was recorded in will be less obvious. So now that we've kind of gone over the why we're here and what we're doing, let's dive right in and let's talk about the first song. That first song is by Sara Bareilles, called come around soon. And it was actually recorded live at the Variety Playhouse here in Atlanta, Georgia. So super appropriate for an event here in Atlanta, because a lot of the people here have probably been to the Variety Playhouse. It is one of the smaller venues here in town. It's very intimate and one of my favorite venues, actually. You really get the sense of that from the track. You can hear the room and you can feel like you're part of the crowd, really. It very much feels like you're sitting, back in the audience. The depth and the width of the soundstage is really apparent as you get the clapping that seems sort of physically closer to your seating position, while she's elevated on the stage, dead center, and certainly a little more recessed behind the speakers, as if you're sitting in the room with her. It's a really fantastic one to start off with. I personally tend to love live recordings when they're done well, and this one definitely is. So on to track 2, we've got a song called Any Place by Bahamas. This song was picked as a contrast to the first track from Sara Bareilles because it is a studio recording, so there's a very different sense of space. This track in particular, they chose and highlighted during the event the tight kick drum and how it doesn't necessarily overwhelm the rest of the track and the male vocals on the track, but is definitely there, present, and still very, very tight, and doesn't sort of lose any of its precision despite having a lot of other stuff going on, but still very similar musically to the first track. Both are pretty down tempo, very easy to listen to, and both great recordings. So track 3 is the track I've already mentioned. It's called Dream of Arrakis. It's by Hans Zimmer. It is from the first Dune soundtrack. The second is also phenomenal, by the way. As I mentioned before, this is a track that really just does some amazing stuff with some very quick-paced drums, so there's a lot of that percussive transience and dynamics that you get out of it. But the best thing for me that it does is it just brings you to this other world. You can listen to it without having any of the video that would normally accompany it in the movie. It'll transport you to that desert of Arrakis, even if you haven't seen the movie, and it just fills the space so well. Especially after the first 2 tracks, which are pretty familiar, right? There's a drum, there's a singer, some guitar. A track like this is just meant to be completely enveloping and just massive in scale, with all these different uncommon sort of elements in it that you can pick out and really focus on. And it's not very long, but it is, just really a great selection for the playlist. Track 4, you have to forgive me as I'm not a classical music aficionado. This is a movement, I believe, the first movement from a ballet called Fandango. It was recorded live in the Walt Disney Symphony Hall, which has a very unique acoustic signature to it. It's a very unique building in general. This is another track that just gives you such a sense of space. This is one on the list that doesn't necessarily really emphasize deep, heavy, low bass, and really the focus is more on the strings and violins in that performance, and the quickness and the ability of the system to separate all of those instruments but still sound cohesive is really impressive. In comparing it to the Sara Bareilles track, Walt Disney Symphony Hall being a much, much larger venue than Variety Playhouse here in Atlanta, the track just sounds so much larger, like you're in the space that it was recorded in, whereas listening to the track from Variety Playhouse, you feel much closer to the performance physically. It's sometimes very easy or sometimes difficult with some systems to sort of physically separate instruments and performers. And as the number of performers grows to something like a full orchestra in this case, that complication just sort of compounds. You have this just really room-filling, massive group of instruments, but being able to pick out those violins and the French horns and where they are in relation to each other physically in space is something that really, really special systems can achieve. And so something like this, a live classical recording, can really help show that, the depth and size of what's possible from a system. We're on to track 5, and this is one that has been getting played here a lot since this event. So it's an electronic dance track called Ratchets by, I'm gonna pronounce this wrong probably, but Hedegaard is what I believe, but Ratchets is the one to know. This is just an all-out assault bass track is what it's here for. An outrageous amount of bass on a system that can produce it. It should, you know, shake the clothes on your body and make it a little hard to breathe in the room when done right, and it's definitely a track you want to turn up as loud as you're comfortable doing. Definitely worth checking out to really see what your system can do. If you've ever thought that your system lacked any bass, this is a track that will show you for certain if it does. Track 6 is a choir track called Lord, Make Me an Instrument of Thy Peace. This is another live recording, and one that John from Rockport actually said they use a lot of times when setting up a system, because there are a lot of very long, drawn-out organ notes, very low frequency, but not overwhelming bass like the previous song. So it can really show you areas of the room where you have suckouts or spikes in bass response. Alan here specifically pointed out this song as something that he's listened to a lot since our event. He was very impressed to be able to pick out individual singers in the chorus, which is super interesting and cool, because it's not something typically you get, you know, groups of people sort of singing together in this, but being able to sort of individually hear the number of people in the chorus is something that's really super impressive with this recording. All right, track number 7 just grabbed me right off the bat when I was listening to it when Josh and John were here, and sort of revisiting it for this has been really awesome and made me want to go listen to them. It's a band called The Pineapple Thief, who I've seen the album art before on a lot of playlists around here, so obviously something that's been used quite a bit on playlists and that kind of stuff, but not something that's really been front of mind for me. But the track is called Driving Like Maniacs, and it's another example of a great male vocal and a really awesome, very tight kick drum without, you know, becoming muddy or sort of lost in the mix of the rest of the song. So just a great track in general and super well recorded. Definitely one that I'll be checking out the rest of the album. Number 8 is a song called Silent Rebel Part 2 by Trixie Whitley. Definitely a fan of this song. It's got a huge driving bass line. Describe the vocals as a female vocalist. They're very haunting almost. It's a lot of ambiance in this track, really sort of fills the room and really sucks you into the story going on in the song. So another example of just great imaging on the vocals, but with this just driving, tight, punchy bass line. And then number 9 is another just monster bass track. This is another electronic song called 30 Hertz, pretty appropriately, by a producer named Fellsius. This track will absolutely push your system to the limits, should be turned up as loud as you can allow. If this is your type of music. It's certainly not for everyone. I love it personally, but it is definitely more of a dance track than something that you would put on for a dinner party. And it will absolutely shake the walls. We were testing it actually before this video, and it absolutely gets down to 30 Hertz in a lot of parts of it. And it is super impressive, the amount of bass that comes out of these speakers. It always blows me away to hear that reproduction without a subwoofer, which is pretty uncommon. So, last but not least is a song that actually a lot of people are probably familiar with. It was featured on Yellowstone, and it's a song called Keep the Wolves Away by Uncle Lucius. It's just another example of a exaggerated or hyped up driving bass line, and then some kind of haunting, this time male vocals over the top of it. And it's definitely a song that drags you in, tells a story. It will stick with you. It's a song that I've definitely sort of found worming its way into my brain, but definitely another song that's made it onto several of the playlists here in the store, and I hear almost daily now. Just a lot of ambiance and something that should really emotionally connect with you from the system, because the story is pretty sad in the song, and you can feel that in the performer's vocals. So I hope you get a chance. I hope you listen to it. The playlist will be available on every streaming service we can think of, but if there's any that we missed that you use at home, please reach out to me. But the links are below, so would love to get feedback on what you think about the playlist. So please put it on at home. Come into the store and listen to any of the tracks that really stand out to you. I'd love to know if any of these songs really hit that sweet spot that I talked about for you between enjoyment and showing off your system. And if you have any favorites, please leave them in the comments below. We'd love to know, that you're listening and that you're enjoying your systems out there. And if you have any suggestions outside this playlist, please share those as well. We never get tired of finding new music to put on these systems. I can only listen to Steely Dan so much. Thanks for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time.